Shalom and welcome to Yeshiva B'nai Noach. I'm Tom Averna, and we continue with our class Judaism 101. Today we'll be dealing with the festivals. Like our last class, dealing with the Jewish life cycles. Festivals have a lot to do with tradition and remembering the past, as well as looking forward to a better future. It's been jokingly said that all Jewish celebrations could be summed up in the words, "They tried to kill us, they failed, let's eat." The humor hides the pain of a difficult life for Israel in exile, but we always try and remember that we have the promise of redemption, and that is always a part of all of our festivals. Once again, here's a look at the books used in compiling this information, and some of these are a little more detailed than others. Some have very specific functions in determining the information inside, but all of them good. Telushkin, of course, one of the better known names, dealing with Jewish literacy. The idea, this one's probably a very good book, the Essentials. And anyway, they're all good. So if you need to take some time, look them up, check them out on Amazon or your favorite bookseller. And if you want to know more information, this is where you would go. The Hebrew calendar is somewhat unique in that it is a combined lunar solar calendar. The Chinese calendar is the only one similar. We're given two commandments that require us to do this. One is the obligation to recognize the time of each new moon, and the other is that the festival of Passover must be in the spring. So that requires the lunar calendar would not enable us to arrive each month back in about the same time. So combining the lunar and the solar calendar, we can coordinate so that Nisan, the first month, always happens in the springtime. Occasionally that is going to mean a double month of Adar, a leap month, if you will. So these are the 4 New Years in the Hebrew calendar, again, based on the commandments from God. These New Years each serve a very specific purpose, very similar to the idea in business of having a fiscal calendar that may not match the regular calendar, or in politics, a new election in terms of beginning each year with that election. In Judaism, we have the political or kingly New Year in Nisan, the month of Nisan. 6 months later is the spiritual New Year of Rosh Hashanah in Tishrei. And a month before each of those in the New Year is the New Year of tithes for the animals and for plants. The animals is set for the month of Elul, and the tithe for trees and plants is in Shavat. And these are the New Years that are determined with the temple in its place. The lesson of the moon for Israel is the story of the lesser light that will eventually shine like the sun. Think of the story of a younger child chosen over the firstborn. The lunar calendar is 12 months, alternating 29 and 30 days. Passover, as I said before, must always fall in the spring, so an added leap month is given 3 times every 17 years. That would be the month of Adar. The calendar created in the 4th century of the Common Era, the Gregorian calendar, was created in the 16th century of the Common Era. The Muslim lunar calendar has no leap months, so holidays could fall in all seasons. Rabbis of the 4th century of the Common Era decided using dates from both Torah and Talmud, as well as other sacred writings at that time. 3,830 years from creation to the destruction of the temple in the Christian year of 70. That's 3,830 minus the 70 equals 3,760 to the Christian year of 1. So 3760 is the Christian year. This We are well into the 5780s now in terms of the years. Each year at Rosh Hashanah, September through October, another year is added. It's not a perfect overlap. Putting aside the argument of creationism versus evolution for the moment, the calendar is a calculation of the history of man as it relates to the people who will become known as Israel. Jewish holidays always occur on the same date on the lunar calendar. Fall holidays reflect the theme of creation. Early spring, Pesach, reflects redemption. Late spring, Shavuot, the theme of revelation. There are no major holidays in the summer months or the winter months, with possible exception of Hanukkah, which is much more of a major holiday here in America. Each month begins with the new moon. Evening begins when there are 3 stars in the sky. Rosh Chodesh is the festival of the new moon. The Hebrew name means head of the month, Rosh being head, Chodesh being month. It is a celebration of simply the new month. It used to be a day of rest for women. It's pronounced pretty much as it looks. The event occurs at the first of each month, the first according to the lunar calendar, but you can always tell because again you have the new moon, the almost completely dark moon, and that begins the process here from day 1 to the final day. One of the ways that you can tell whether the moon is growing in size or diminishing in size. In other words, if it's close to day 1 of the month or day 29 or 30, is you take your hand and hold it up to the crescent. And if you can grab the crescent with your left hand from this side with your left hand, it means that the moon is getting bigger. Your left hand generally the weaker hand, so it means that the moon is able to get out of your grasp and grow bigger. If you can grab the moon with your right hand, the stronger hand, it means you're compressing it and it's going to be getting smaller. So that's one way to tell whether you're at the beginning of the month or the end of the month. The one of the parts of the festival of the Rosh Chodesh is, if possible, you stand outside the synagogue, you look for the moon. While you're seeing it, if you can, you say the prayers. In the early days, the High Court declared when this day was. The Shabbat before Shabbat Mevarchim, there are special prayers. So just as the solar calendar sets the hours of the day and the seasons, the lunar calendar establishes the days of the month and week. In Hebrew, the days of the week are referred to by their relation to the 7th day, to Shabbat. So Sunday is Rishon, that would be the first day. Monday is Sheni, the second day. Tuesday is Shlishi, the third day. Wednesday is Reveh, the fourth day. Thursday is Chamishi, the fifth day. Friday is Shishi, the sixth day. And of course, Shabbat. Now, because of Judaism's strict aversion to idolatry, there's some concern about using the names of the days of the week popular in national cultures. For instance, in America, the days of the week are named after both Roman and Norse gods. So the concern is that you are speaking the name of a god or goddess when you say the name of the day. Sunday, for instance, of course, that's pretty obvious, the sun god. In Rome, Apollo. Monday or Moon Day is for the goddess Luna. Tuesday is for the Norse god Tyr and the Roman god Mars. Usually you can hear the Roman names in French names for the days of the week. But again, the Roman god Mars is Tuesday. Wednesday here in America, Woden's Day, is for Odin, and the Roman god Mercury. Thursday is Thor's Day, or Jupiter, and Friday is Frigg or Freya in the Norse, and the Roman god or goddess in this case would be Venus. And then Saturday is for Saturn. So again, that's why it's, if you can learn the days of the week just by saying the first day, second day, third day, it's considered to be a lot better in terms of ignoring any form of idolatry. The other thing that's interesting about the lunar cycle, just as you can tell what time of day it is by watching where the sun is in the sky, with the moon, you can tell pretty much what day of the month it is. So you know that when the moon is full, it's the 15th day. So if it's growing or waxing, then you kind of figure how much of the moon is left, and you can sort of figure that, as it's smaller, then that's the first day of the week. It's the first day of the month, rather. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th, 14th or 15th, depending on where you're beginning in the month. And then as it gets smaller, then you count the rest of the month heading towards either 29 or 30 or 28. So that's one of the nice things about really paying attention to the lunar calendar. Of course, we start to look at the festivals with Shabbat. The Hebrew name means Sabbath or day of rest. There are 7 major festivals in each year. We also honor the Sabbath on the 7th day of each week. Order of service for the Shabbat generally is at home. All electrical and wireless units are off. Light candles at local sunset, which is 3 stars in the sky. You say the blessing over the wine, the blessing over the bread. So we have the wine, the blessing here, and then the blessing over the bread, the challah, and then you usually have, not shown here, but you'd have the blessing over the children, the Ashes Chayil, the blessing over the wife, and then you eat the festive meal. And generally, there are 3 to 4 such meals required on Shabbat. And you spend the night and the next day with your family, studying, praying, relaxing. There's no cooking, no driving, no creating or destroying. Singing is encouraged. The day of rest is really about ending every week, and it's intended to provide space and time without work, in which the observer of Shabbat can find meaning and joy in their lives. It's the one and only holy day that originates with God's celebration of it. And the commandment regarding the Sabbath is the 4th of the 10 commandments, which says, remember or observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Pronounced Shabbat. You might also hear Shabbos or Shabbos and in the pronunciation. Again, it happens once a week. Shabbat lasts generally 25 hours, or always 25 hours. It begins just before sundown on Friday until an hour after sundown on Saturday evening. As far as special foods for a Shabbat, generally it's looked at, the challah, of course, is one of the special foods, but the other thing is anything that you specifically love. There are stories of some of the sages of the past. If they didn't have a lot of money, they would save as much money as they can and buy the very best. Sometimes it was the only day of the week that they would eat meat. But again, you always save the best. So you go shopping, you see something you really like, you buy it and then save it for Shabbat. It's another way to celebrate the holiday. Shabbat, as I said before, begins with the lighting of the candles, uh, and then the blessings that you would say over your children. May they be like Ephraim and Manasseh for the boys, and then the patriarch, the Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah for the girls. You say the Eshes Chayil, a good woman uh, who can find blessing for your wife. And then you have the washing of the hands before you say the blessing over the bread. And you always say the blessing over the wine first and then the bread. The idea of Shabbat is as a queen, and we welcome that queen into our home for that night only. So we have, as we would if we were entertaining royalty, we always have the best food. We have happy songs called Zemerot. Shabbat is also seen as a bride. So the the evening of Friday is spent again very much in celebration. Synagogue then is the next day, and usually most of the day, or at least the beginning of the day, is spent in the synagogue. The work that is forbidden on the Sabbath is sometimes rather confused, but it is essentially, rather interestingly, that there are 39 malachim, 39 categories of work, um, and that is based on the building of the Mishkan, the temple in the wilderness. Um, it's based on the kinds of work that were done in the building of the Mishkan. So you have um, the idea of agricultural and field work, which is separating useful from non-useful items. 11 in that category, including baking. You have work dealing with clothing and fabric. There are 13 in that category, which includes leather work, and writing is also part of that. You have construction, 3 categories, fire, 3 categories that have to do with building, have to do with lighting a fire. So that's essentially where the idea or the restrictions come from in terms of what you can and can't do on Shabbat. So if you read the section on the building of the Mishkan in Torah, and you see all of the things that they did there, those are the things you can't do on Shabbat, and that's because there's the verse there talks about after the Mishkan is where then it begins to talk about Shabbat. So that's the connection that the rabbis made with the two. It's also an interesting comment, I guess I would make here as well. Those that have a concern with the oral law, I would ask you, reading the Torah only as the only source of law, we know from the Torah that it is a death penalty if you don't observe Shabbat correctly. But how do you know what that means? There's no definition given. The only definition is someone gathering wood and someone lighting a fire. I think those are the only 2 restrictions that are mentioned. And yet we know that there were many more things that were forbidden. How do we know that? Well, the only way we know that is from the oral law. But the oral law is always connected to something in Torah. So a little bit of an aside there about the law. We'll talk about more of that when we get to that section in the class on the beliefs. So some of the symbols of the Jewish holiday, of course, the candles, lighting of the 2 candles, very much a symbol. The challah is also very symbolic of Shabbat, and the blessing over the wine. Again, those would be the main symbols, I would say, of Shabbat. Shabbat greeting, you can say Shabbat Shalom. You can say more the Yiddish Yiddish greeting would be Gut Shabbos, Gut Shabbos. Um, so either one of those, Shabbat Shalom, Gut Shabbos. Um, so it would be appropriate greetings to say to someone on Shabbat. The end of Shabbat is traditionally marked by a ritual called Havdalah. The order of service for Havdalah, 1 hour past sunset, you light the Havdalah candle. This is an ornate one. You generally would see these. There have to be at least 6 braids, or there should be at least 6 braids in the candle, culminating in 6 wicks that you would be lighting here. There's also these spices, very distinctive smelling, sweet smelling spices that you would put in here. You take the lid off and then you smell the spices as part of the ceremony. So the first thing you do, you light the candle, and then you say the blessing over the wine, and then you say the blessing over the spices, and then you say the blessing over the candle. And then the last thing is you put the candle out in whatever, in the wine that's left over. It's usually what you've poured down here, and that's where you put the Havdalah candle out there in the wine. Again, the idea of that being that you are beginning the week and you're asking for a blessing of joy, which is what wine represents, as you put out the light of Shabbat, and the joy from Shabbat would transfer to the joy of the week, Shavuot. And you can, at that point, say a blessing for a good week. Singing is encouraged when you're separating Shabbat from the rest of the week. Another option for the end of Shabbat is what's called the meal of Messiah, meal of King David. And that is another festive meal. That would be the 4th meal if you did that. And that's essentially the last meal of Shabbat, but it brings you into Shavuot, the week. The month of Adar, which is actually the last month of the calendar, the Hebrew calendar, is the transition month from winter to spring. But the holiday of Purim, which happens in Adar, really kicks off the spring festivals. It usually occurs in March. Adar, as I mentioned before, can also be repeated in a leap year, so you can have Adar 1 and Adar 2 to make certain that Nisan begins in the spring. So you might have an additional 29 days, 28 days in one month as opposed to another month. But that begins the spring festivals, which will start in Nisan. As we look at the festivals, then we'll begin with the festival of Purim, the first festival. Again, as I said, kind of kicking off the springtime festivals. In the synagogue, the order of service is that you would say prayers, you read the book of Esther, you might watch, and most often they have plays that the kids will do, a Purim play where they'll all dress up in costumes and either from a script or however they present the play, they'll present the story of Purim. You're also commanded to have fun, eat, drink, and be merry. The Hebrew name of Purim means lots. It refers to the book of Esther in which the villain Haman drew lots to set the date for the Jews' destruction. It's the festival itself is a celebration, as I said, most celebrations are. It's a celebration of the narrow escape from genocide of the Jews by Haman, who is a descendant of the Amalek people, who have traditionally throughout history been main spirit, if you will, of people who want to completely destroy Israel and the Jews. The event is described in the biblical book of Esther. Um, and as I said, generally sometime between mid-March or around mid-March, sometime in March is when the festival of Purim would begin or would happen. Some of the foods that you might see at a Purim celebration, triangular pastries called Haman Tashin or Haman's pockets, translated. It looks like a hat, actually. Some people also eat other foods with things hidden inside them, like dumplings. Drinking alcohol is, for many people, a part of the Purim tradition. Um, on Purim, we read the book of Esther and use grogs or noisemakers, groggers, to drown out the name. Every time that the name of Haman is pronounced, then you would either boo very loudly or turn your grogger and try and drown out the name. Kids, many adults get dressed up in costumes. It's also traditional to give money to charity, to send anonymous package of goodies to your friends. They're called mishloach manot, and to drink to excess. There's one of two festivals. This is one of two festivals where that is often done. Purim is a minor festival in that there's no traditional obligation not to work. One of the few festivals still that will still be observed according to tradition in Messianic times. Most of the other festivals, because they were about troubles and trials and tribulations, will not be celebrated in Messianic times because we'll be focusing on all things positive there. But Purim is considered one of the festivals that will still continue to be played or celebrated in the times of the Messiah. Some of the symbols of the holiday: masks, costumes, noisemakers, and of course the very sweet Hamantaschen. How would you greet someone during Purim? Well, you'd say Happy Purim. You can say Purim Sameach, which means Happy Purim. Nisan is, I mentioned, one of the main New Year's celebrations. This is considered the New Year for the kings. It's the political start of the year. Since it's also the birth of Israel, again, celebrating the Exodus, it's the birth of Israel as a nation. So Nisan is considered a New Year celebration, and it's the first month, considered the first month of the year. Again, coordinating with the solar calendar, it would happen sometime between March and April. Is the month of Nisan. It's always, as I said, in the spring. 3 festivals in this month. Passover is how we commonly refer to the festival, but technically, we actually no longer observe the Passover, as it is primarily a temple ritual requiring the sacrifice and eating of a lamb, which is what happened on the night before the Exodus took place. So then the actual festival that we celebrate is technically called the Festival of Unleavened Bread, where for 7-8 days you are not allowed to eat any leaven. You can only eat unleavened bread called matzahs. So then these are followed. The festival is followed by the blessing and giving of the first fruits, also known as the counting of the Omer. And that is counted for 50 days, which takes us to the third month, Sivan, and the festival of Pentecost, which means 50 in Greek. And that's in the third month in Sivan. In the 5th month of Av, we will remember the many destructions and atrocities committed against our people. It's a day of fasting. And then closing out the spring cycle in the 6th month is the month of Elul. Again, the main festival in the month of Nisan, the first month, is the festival of Passover or Pesach. The order of service at home, there are handouts that will go over that. That's very the word Seder that is what the meal is called simply means order, and there's a very distinctive order that you would follow. The Hebrew word um, uh, Pesach, Passover, is about the passing over of the angel of death. The 8-day holiday, as I mentioned, actually the festival of unleavened bread, is 8 days in the diaspora. I believe it's 7 days then in Israel. But it celebrates God's freeing the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. The name refers to God passing over the houses of the Israelites during the 10th plague, the killing of the firstborn. So the first 2 days of Pesach, Passover, there's no work. It's a full restriction for those first 2 days. And then also the eighth day for some would be considered the same thing. Again, Pesach is the Hebrew pronunciation, and it happens. It falls between March and April. The date it can be as early as March, as late as April. Jewish holiday foods for Passover. Traditionally, Jews eat no bread, of course, or anything that has leaven in it, and instead eat matzah, which is unleavened bread. See that here. All food that is leavened or fermented, or that is possible to ferment, is forbidden. There's a special wine that you would drink for Passover as opposed to the rest of the year. Ashkenazic Jews also include rice, beans, legumes, and corn on the list of forbidden foods. There are many traditional foods that are eaten on Passover, including matzah balls, gefilte fish, macaroons. Additionally, there are many symbolic foods that appear on the Seder plate that are explained during the Seder. This would be the Seder plate here. So you have the 6 different kinds of foods here, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. Excuse me. Some of the activities of Pesach. It's in many Jewish homes. It's the time of spring cleaning. You would thoroughly clean your house as you are getting rid of any leaven that you might find, and then using the Seder for the order of the service. Seders are heavily ritualized holiday meals in which we are commanded to tell the story of Passover every year with different food and rituals. Also, another activity of Pesach is Me'och Chitim, which is charity to enable all Jews to celebrate Pesach. So if you know of someone that can't afford to get all of the special foods and things for Pesach, then it is a mitzvah to purchase them for them and to help them get them. Forbidden foods, like anything with leaven in it, are removed, actually physically removed from the home. Either you prepare well enough in advance that there isn't anything left, or you pack up all of your foods and you take it somewhere besides your home. In some cases, you actually sell in a kind of a ritual fashion. If you have Gentile friends, you can sell your leaven to them with the understanding that at the end of Passover, you'll buy it back. But you have to actually do a transaction to make it official. Some of the symbols of the holiday, you have the 3 matzah. On the Seder plate, you have the shank bone of a lamb, zaroa. You have the egg, betzah. You have the horseradish root, maror, parsley, which is called karpas, an apple nut cinnamon mixture called charoset, and a second bitter vegetable, generally romaine lettuce called chazaret. And then you have the 4 cups of wine. 4 cups of wine stand for the 4 statements of redemption. I will bring you out. I will deliver you. I will redeem you, and I will take you. Those are the 4 cups. Elijah's cup, which is the 5th cup, actually is a reference to Exodus 6:8, where it says, and I will bring you to the land of Israel. That's the last blessing. Um, the Haggadah is the Seder book that has the instructions and the order of the meal. So Passover is a time when each Jew embarks on a personal journey from slavery to freedom. The whole purpose of everything we do during the Passover meal and celebration is to think about how we are, even in this world, in this life, what enslaves us and how do we move from that enslavement to freedom. So in order to guide us in our quest, the sages carefully wrote a book outlining the 15 steps to freedom. It's called the Haggadah. And in that book, you see the 15 steps that will take you from the beginning of the Passover or Feast of Unleavened Bread celebration to the end of it during the meal. So the first step is Kaddish, which is to sanctify the 1st cup of wine. The second step is called Urchatz, which is a washing of the hands. One of 2 times you'll do that. The third step is the vegetable, eating of the vegetable, the karpas. We take a green vegetable, bless God for creating fruits from the ground. The 4th element is yachatz, which is breaking the matzah. We break the middle matzah, put the larger part aside to serve later as the afikomen, or dessert. The 5th part is the heart of it. That is actually the telling of the story. You would read that from the Haggadah, and you have your 2nd cup of wine. Also during this Magid time, you have the 4 questions, the Exodus story, and then you end with the 10 plagues, listing them. Then the 6th celebration, or the 6th portion of the celebration, is called Rachsa, which is more the official washing of the hands before the meal. It's customary for observant Jews to always wash their hands before eating a meal with bread. And then the 7th is the motzi, the bringing forth of the matzah. We eat the matzah. We make the hamotzi blessing on all 3 matzahs to thank God for bringing forth bread from the earth. And then the 8th, finally, we get to the matzah itself. It's baked quickly, 18 minutes to bake it. There's a particular process. Of course, generally in America especially, most people buy their matzahs. The spelling of matzah is similar to mitzvah, which means commandment. And that's part of the significance of it. Just as we shouldn't delay in the making of matzah, so too we shouldn't procrastinate in the performing of a mitzvah. The 9th is the bitter herbs, the eating of the bitter herbs. At the Seder, we would say, quote, in every generation they rise against us to annihilate us, as we're remembering that bitterness as we eat the bitter herbs. The Egyptians broke our backs and our spirits. The Romans destroyed the Second Temple, and rivers of Jewish blood flowed. So it was in every generation: the Crusades, the Inquisitions, the pogroms, the Holocaust, the Arab terrorism. All of those times we remember and think about during this time of Pesach. We just think about the intense and irrational violence that stalked our people to every corner of the globe. The 10th, again, we're counting to 15 here. The 10th part of the celebration is something called the Hillel sandwich. It's the idea of the bricks and the mortar from our enslavement in Egypt. So you take the broken matzah, the middle matzah, and you hold it together. You break it and you hold it together with a combination of the charoset and possibly, I like, not everybody does this, but you have the horseradish and the charoset together, so you get the bitter and the sweet. Um, and remember that charoset is apples and cinnamon and raisins sometimes, but it's a very sweet mixture. The matzah, remember you're using the broken matzah, and that you think about the fact that the matzah was once whole, so too the Jewish people can become crushed and divisive, but we are held together by our common links to Torah and our shared historical experiences. And then finally, in the 11th segment, you have the meal. This is when the feast takes place. Usually several courses happen for the meal. But oftentimes, especially for younger children, you would make sure that they're not hungry coming to the table, because it is a long process to get to the meal itself. And then after the meal, the Tzafun segment is where you bring the hidden afikomen out of hiding, and that's the last thing that you eat at night is the afikomen. At the Seder, generally the afikomen is hidden. The kids then go and search and find it and win a prize. One of the other things that generally happens. The same is true, symbolizing our spiritual yearning to do the right thing. Although it might be buried deep inside of us, we can search for it, find it, and the prize is pure freedom. So the 13th is the blessing after the meal, the third cup of wine. And then finally, Elijah's cup, the fourth cup of wine, is blessed and drunk after Hallel. Hallel then is the next. It's just simply songs of praise, followed by Nirtza, which is the last event. And that's where we conclude the Seder with the prayer, next year in Jerusalem. To greet someone on Passover, you would simply say Happy Pesach or Happy Passover or Hag Kasher V'Sameach, which means have a happy and kosher holiday. That's the festival of Pesach. The next holiday happens over the course of 7 weeks, 49 days from Passover, leading to Shavuot. The Omer comprises those days paralleling the wandering of the Israelites in the wilderness for 40 years, which in Torah, the day the celebration begins, the day after Passover begins and ends with the receiving of the Torah on Shavuot, again symbolizing that time from the travel. I've said 40 years, but it's actually the symbolism of the travel from Egypt until they get to Sinai, which traditionally is believed to have been 49 days in doing that. So you end with the receiving of the Torah, which is the celebration of Shavuot. Originally, the Omer was the measure of wheat brought as a donation of harvest in gratitude to feed the temple workers in ancient Israel. As our need for renewal of spirit builds in these troubling times, the Jewish spiritual renaissance continues unabated. Kabbalists have developed a powerful spiritual practice for Sefirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, through pairing it with a practice drawn from the intersection of authentic Kabbalah that accords with contemporary psychology and spiritual development. So during the 7 weeks, the 49 days, you look at 7 of the Sephirot, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Had, Yesod, and Malchut, each of them having their own attributes. So Chesed has the attribute of abundance and loving kindness. So it's sort of a complicated calendar, but you would have 7 days essentially of Chesed, 7 of Gevurah, 7 of Tiferet. During each of those days, then you are meditating or focusing on whatever that attribute is. So during the days of Chesed, you're focusing on what it means to be loving, what it means to be kind, what it means to have abundance and provide abundance. They're all these meditations, and there are apps for that. Chabad has a very good one that will give you meditations that you can do, but you can certainly come up with your own as you go through it. So it's a time of introspection and preparation for the giving of the Torah. The Kabbalist Omer practice is done based, as I said, on a 7-week grid of 7 of the 10 qualities of what they call Eitz Chaim, the tree of life. The tree is a mind map, a model, a metaphor for the source of life and the mystery of the source of life, manifesting as all that is apparent to us, including who we are, and perhaps even more important, who we are becoming. So 3 of the highest aspects of the Sephirot of the tree are not directly attainable. There are 10, but we only focus on the 7 that are more attainable in our own lives here in the flesh. We can only conceive of those upper levels and at times experience the grace of the dimensions known as Keter, which is the crown, Chokmah, wisdom, and Bina, understanding. And so it's all about, during the time of the counting the Omer, it's all about refining the 7 attainable aspects by combining them with each other and contemplating or meditating on the new pair for each day with as powerful a spiritual practice as you can do. So this approach to the Omer practice is transformation. It lasts, as I say, over the 49 days and becomes a very accessible spiritual journey. And it's fun to do. It can at times seem tedious to continue it, but it's well worth doing. and again, always, anytime you can take that time to look inside yourself is a time worthwhile spent. So that's, again, the counting of the Omer. During the festival of the Omer, there are some other festivals, minor festivals that take place, not necessarily less important. One of them is Lag BeOmer, also known as a Jewish holiday that begins at sundown, generally sometime in May, and it ends at sundown on the next day. It's celebrated on the 33rd day of the Omer, which is the 49-day period between Passover and Shavuot. The word Lag is made up of the Hebrew letters Lamed and Gimel, and those add up to numerically 33. Lamed is 30, Gimel is 3, so that's 33, which is why it happens on the 33rd day. That's why it's called that, because it happens on the 33rd day. Some of the popular traditions celebrated during this festival is the lighting of bonfires. There's traditions behind all of these, which I'm not going to go into here, but lighting of bonfires, huge bonfires in Israel. There's you'll see that take place. Also, interestingly enough, again, tradition behind it, but playing with bows and arrows is part of the festival of Lag BeOmer. Singing songs, various songs for the festival. In Israel, Lag BeOmer is celebrated as a symbol for the fighting Jewish spirit. The most exciting place to celebrate Lag BeOmer is at the tomb of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Meron, Israel, where hundreds of thousands of Jews gather each year. Occasionally, one year there was a major problem with as many people as were gathered there, but usually it takes place without event. Also, it celebrates the Bar Kokhba revolution, so it has a couple of meanings behind it. But that's the celebration of Lag BeOmer. 2 other celebrations that generally take place during this time is Yom HaShoah, which is remembrance of the Holocaust. and the name simply means Holocaust Day. The Europeans commemorate the Holocaust on the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, which was January 27th, 1945. The Israeli government, however, wanted a date that would honor Jewish resistance to the Nazi genocide of World War II. So after some debate, it was decided that Yom HaShoah would be observed on the 27th of the Hebrew month of Nisan, since it was during the period of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, an act of Jewish heroism and resistance. In the United States, Yom HaShoah is observed on the 27th of Nisan. There's really no holiday involved with it. It's not traditional to eat any particular foods during this time. It's not necessarily traditional to fast, although some may do that. Some of the activities that may happen during this time, many communities hold commemorative events. Yahrzeit candles are lit. So the symbols of the holiday would be memorial candles. You might also see yellow stars of David, reminiscent of what Jews were forced to wear during the times in Germany and other places. There's no real greeting for it. The other holiday is Yom HaAtzmaut, which is a lot more festive. It's Israel's Independence Day. It celebrates the formal founding of the modern state of Israel. It happens on the 5th of Iyar. Jewish holiday foods, where Jewish communities hold fairs or other big events, it's a good time to get falafel and other Israeli foods. In the United States, it's the custom to have a fair or other celebration. Some religious Jews add a celebratory liturgy to the weekday prayers. Some of the symbols, you might see Israeli flags being flown or waved, music, foods. It's a time of celebration. No official greeting for this particular festival. The next major festival then, after the counting of the Omer on the 50th day, Pentecost, which is what that means. Generally, you would have a celebration in the synagogue and or at home. Sometimes everything is done at the synagogue or at home or both. One of the typical things that are done during this festival is the staying up all night to learn Torah, to listen to the Ten Commandments read in the synagogue, to read the book of Ruth, the book of the writings of Pirkei Avot, the sayings of the fathers, reading the Torah, of course. You eat lots of dairy, generally no meat, of course, but you're eating lots of fun foods that are made with dairy products. The name, as I said, means the Feast of Weeks is the name of the festival. It's celebrated 7 weeks after Passover. It's about Shavuot combines 2 ancient holidays, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and that marks the covenant between God and the Jewish people 7 weeks after the Exodus from Egypt, and the early summer grain harvest is the other thing that Shavuot celebrates. So you have another giving of the first fruits, if you will, of the first fruits of the grain harvest. Whereas the counting of the Omer was the first fruits of the barley harvest. Pentecost, again, meaning 50. The name itself is much more familiar. Pentecost is much more familiar to Christians. There's a very important section of the Hebrew or of the Christian writings that deal with an event that took place at Pentecost. So that's why it's familiar, but it is a Hebrew celebration. And it's also, just as the counting of the Omer was, it's a time of mindfulness, of introspection, of thinking about how the law, the Torah, changes us and enables us to become better. We read the Pirkei Avot, which is all the famous sayings of the sages of past times. Also, it may include a celebration of the Bar Kokhba victories and the ending of the plague of Rabbi Akiva. Again, some significant events. I'm not going to really go into it here, but those are some of the other things that you might see talked about or celebrated during the festival of Shavuot, or Shavuos. If you were Ashkenazic, you would pronounce that final T as an S. So again, that's going to happen sometime in the month of June, but 49 days after Passover is what you are looking for. 6th to 7th of Sivan is the Hebrew date. Foods for Shavuot, traditional, as I said, to eat dairy foods, so lots of blintzes, lots of cheese, lots of ice cream. On dairy holidays, people who keep kosher don't eat meat. The Book of Ruth is traditionally read during this time in the synagogue. Some participate in an all-night Torah study session, and the green plants and cuttings for decorations, usually the norm. In Israel, you would spend the morning at the Western Wall. Some of the symbols of the holiday, of course, fruit, sheaves of wheat, tablets representing the giving of the Torah. The greeting would be, one greeting could be Hag Sameach, which simply means happy holiday, or Gut Yontif in Yiddish for good holiday. One of the most significant days, I suppose you could say, Tish B'Av. It simply means the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, Tisha B'Av, and that is when it occurs, obviously. It is considered, at this point, the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. The fast day, it is a day of fasting, commemorates the destruction of both the first and the second temple. They were both said to have been destroyed on that day. There are many other tragedies that happened, according to tradition, on the 9th of Av. In the medieval period, Jews began attaching those other tragedies, including the expulsion from Spain in 1492. So it just became a general day of mourning for all of the tragedies that we've been through. That's going to happen again the 9th of Av, generally sometime around the month of August, that'll take place. Jewish holiday foods, well, there aren't any. It's a 24-hour fast day with no food or water from sundown the first evening until sundown the following evening. Some of the activities that you would do through this, though this is a major fast day with no food, no water, no washing, it is actually a minor holiday in the sense that there is no requirement to abstain from work. You can work during this time, but again, it's a time of complete fasting. The main activity is hearing the chanting of the Book of Lamentations in the synagogue, during which it's traditional to sit on the floor or even in the dark. No major symbols for the holidays. Some might remember it by photos of Jerusalem. An unusual feature of Tish B'Av is that it's traditional not to greet people during the fast, so there's no greeting. This comes from Jewish mourning practices. When one visits a house of mourning, it's not usual to greet the mourners, so there's no greeting for the holiday. So now we move into the fall holidays, again, just coming off of the month of Av through Elul, and then into Tishrei. The high holy days encompass Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. While the holidays themselves are only 2 or 3 days total, some people observe Rosh Hashanah for 2 days and some people observe it for 1. The ritual and engagement of the high holiday period begins a month before Rosh Hashanah and includes the 10-day period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, called the 10 days of repentance, Teshuvah. So the month of Elul, just like the counting of the Omer, The month of Elul, the entire month, is considered a month of preparation for Tishrei. And by preparation, it means to again meditate, to focus on the things that you want to change, the things that you want to do better, the things that you want to repent for, to do teshuvah for. All of those things, you begin the process at the beginning of the month of Elul, and usually August to September, and then Tishrei, September to October, in that time period. Then you begin the celebration. So this moves us into the winter cycle, where we actually find no biblical festivals, but in the 9th month of Kislev, we celebrate Hanukkah. And it is found in the extra biblical text of the Maccabees. So then nothing happens until the month of Adar, and we begin the cycle again with the festival of Purim from the book of Esther, again leading us into the spring cycle. The time of Rosh Hashanah, the celebration of the high holiday, is traditionally thought of as the New Year celebration. Again, I said there are 4 New Years on the Hebrew calendar. There are 2 major New Years. Nisan, that we talked about, as I said, is the civil New Year, the year of the kings. Rosh Hashanah would be the religious New Year, the spiritual New Year. In the synagogue, generally you spend a long day of prayer, listening to the shofar. At home, there would be festive eating with apples and honey, and again, a time of introspection. So we began that introspection in the month of Elul. It continues, although again, we have a holiday here, so we want to be joyous, but we also want to spend some time in thinking about preparing for the festival or the holiday of Yom Kippur, which will happen 10 days after. The Hebrew name Rosh Hashanah simply means head, Rosh, head of the Shana of the year, Rosh Hashanah, or New Year. So it's both the celebration of the creation of the world. Rabbinic tradition is that the world was created. Again, a reason why it's the New Year on Rosh Hashanah. And as I said, the religious New Year. The holiday itself lasts generally 7 days. The theme is renewal, or a day of memory, remembering. As I mentioned, the month before Elul is a time of introspection. Saturday evening before the Selichot service at midnight, you would get up and be eager to do repentance during that time. The 4 New Years, I mentioned one of them already. The civil New Year happens in the 1st of Nisan. The New Year for animals is the 1st of Elul. The New Year for trees is the 15th of Shavat. And the New Year for the world is Tishrei, is this one, in the religious New Year. Some of the foods that you'll see during Rosh Hashanah, of course, apples and honey. Oftentimes, you'll see round challahs. It doesn't have to be round, but that's the tradition. And it might have raisins in it. You'll also see honey cakes, pomegranates, pumpkins, other round foods, sweet foods, and foods that are gold colored, like carrots. All of that as part of the traditional foods of Rosh Hashanah. Some of the activities, of course, synagogue attendance, the sounding of the shofar. One of probably the most powerful part of the holiday is listening to the shofar. Eating apples dipped in honey, mentioned that before. You might send New Year's cards. The tashlik ceremony is an interesting one. It's where you go to a body of water, a body of running water, and you cast your bread, which is symbolic of your sins, into the water. You'll find that verse in Micah 7:19. Wearing white is often a part of the tradition, and making ethical wills or resolutions. The idea that we do this in America, at any rate, in the United States, many parts of the world, the 1st of January, they have New Year's resolutions. The same thing happens, and probably this is where it began, with the resolutions that you would make at Rosh Hashanah. So you're making those New Year's resolutions. The shofar that I mentioned, listening in the synagogue, there are 3 sounds, 3 blasts of the shofar in each of these groupings. So you have tekiah, which is a long blast. We have shevarim, 3 short blasts, and teruah, which is 9 short staccato blasts. Doot, 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 doot. Or the long blast is doot. The 3 blasts would be doot, doot, doot. Again, with the shofar, and sounding a lot better than what I did. But anyway, that's the shofar. Some of the symbols of the holiday: the shofar, ram's horn, apples, honey, pomegranates, the book of life. Greetings during this time: Happy New Year, or Shana Tova. If you want to give a more complete version of the greeting, it would be the Shana Tova Tikatevu, which means may you be inscribed for a good year in the book of life. Yiddish-speaking Jews may say a gut yor, or a good year, or gut yantif, meaning a good holiday. I mentioned the shofar blasts. So you have the loud blast, tekiah. You have the broken blast, 3 short blasts of shevarim. Teruma, a loud noise or shout with now 9 staccato blasts. And then the last one generally is called tekiah gedulah, which is just you blow the shofar for as long as you possibly can on one breath. And that's the process. That's the ritual going through that. Unfortunately, in class, I would play give you a sound of it, but you can always Google shofar, and you'll find YouTube videos or videos where you can listen to the sound of the shofar. The Messiah is supposed to be announced, his coming, with the shofar blast. And to listen to the shofar, it's such a powerful instrument. And if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend that you at least make the attempt to find it and listen to it. It'll just send shivers if you're hearing it done well. The last but not least of the major festivals, Yom Kippur, the high holiday. And this day is one that's mostly spent in the synagogue. Most of the day is spent praying, confessing, repenting. Only covers, and this is very important for people that are unfamiliar with the celebration, the confession, the repentance at Yom Kippur only covers sins between man and God. You cannot, if you've committed a sin against another person, you have to make personal amends. Very often, people will spend the time before Rosh Hashanah, before Yom Kippur, and try and find people that they need to find in order to seek forgiveness from them. It's a difficult process, and sometimes it may be, if you do that, it may be rebuffed. You might not be given forgiveness, but as long as you've made the attempt, and tradition says you have to try 3 times, then that's what matters. But sins between man and God are the sins that you confess, repent for, and are forgiven for if you do that during this time. As I said, complete fast. There's no eating, no drinking, no bathing even, no brushing of your teeth, anything using water, plus everything that is forbidden on Shabbat is forbidden on this day as well. The Yom Kippur means the Day of Atonement. As As I said, it's a fast day, traditionally filled with prayer, collective confession, and atonement. And the reason why it's really important to spend the day in the synagogue, if you can, some of us are not near a synagogue, which makes it very difficult. But it's important to have that idea of collective confession. And it's the same reason that the idea of a minyan of 10 men is so important in prayer. It's that idea of bringing a group of people together that enable each other to be uplifted in the sense of really being sincere, meditative in your prayers. We're not always there personally, but if we're in a group of people, those that are at a higher place can raise everyone else up to that. So it's said that on Rosh Hashanah, the book of life is written, and on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. We want to always choose life. Cheshbon HaNefesh, there's an accounting that takes place. Yom Kippur, as I said, doesn't atone until one appeases his neighbor. That's from the Mishnah. In between days, called the days of awe, we settle our debts and grievances. Deuteronomy 29:30 would be a place to look it up to find out more about it. Pronounced Yom Kippur, and it generally happens in October, November. The holiday foods, there are none. It's a fast day, 25 hours like Shabbat in length. In addition to not eating, some of the other activities you wouldn't drink, which is again a complete fast. You wouldn't wash, you wouldn't wear leather as another thing that you abstain from. Anything that is connected to animals, you don't wear during this time. Many people, as I say, go to synagogue for most of the day, or at least for a special service called Yitzkor that honors the dead. The night of Yom Kippur is the Kol Nidre service to release us from all vows to God, not to man. The fast and the holiday ends with a festive break the fast meal after sundown. The book of Jonah is read. The Al-Chet prayer is a long list of sins that we read, and we read it as if, even if we've never committed that sin, we still read it as if we had, because we are reading it for each other. The shofar, one of the symbols of the holiday, you wear white clothing oftentimes. The spirit of Yom Kippur every day is reflected in the Amidah prayer, the Shemona Esrei. So one of the greetings that you would say during Yom Kippur is have an easy fast, or Tzom Kal. Some say Shana Tova, which is Hebrew for Happy New Year, but of course that's for Rosh Hashanah. Or Gamar Hatima Tova, a good completion to your inscription in the Book of Life, essentially. That's Yom Kippur. In the temple during this time, there were two major sacrifices with the bull as well as the ram, or the two goats for Azazel. That most of us know the story of, but anyway, this is happening at the temple during this time. Sukkot then happens after Yom Kippur, and it is really the last. I think I said Yom Kippur was the last. It's the last major one. The Sukkot is also a major festival. Sukkot is another one of those. I mentioned that Purim is believed that festival will continue into the Messianic era. Sukkot is another one that may as well. And it is significant in a number of different ways. One of the things that you will see are booths or tabernacles that are set up during this time. It can be ornate or simple. There's supposed to be the flowers, the greenery set up as the roof. You need to be able to see the stars, but it's called the Festival of the Booths, or the Festival of Tabernacles. This is a week-long holiday. We remember the experience of the Israelites wandering in the desert where they didn't have homes. They had tents or tabernacles or booths that they lived in. And as we do this, we think about the fact that we are living in a state of insecurity now in exile. Leviticus 23:39 would be a verse to look at in terms of this festival. The first 2 days of Sukkot um, are no work days, non-work days. And again, this is going to happen around October. It's the 15th to the 22nd of Tishrei. There's no specific holiday foods. However, fruits and vegetables are definitely a part of the harvest theme for the festival. Activities, families and communities build a sukkah or a hut, which we talked about here. You'll use that for the whole week of Sukkot. You're supposed to eat and entertain, and some people even sleep in their sukkahs. Generally, they're close to or connected to the house, but again, this is where you're going to spend most of your time during this week. And the huts remind us of the ones our ancestors dwelled in while wandering in the desert. The sukkah should have 3 sides and a roof, but the roof needs to be open to the elements. So often very difficult if it's raining, but it needs to be open. There are also rituals that invite our ancestors to join us and to celebrate the bounty of the Holy Land. It takes place in the fall, not the spring, even though we're remembering the Exodus wanderings. And read one of the books we read is Ecclesiastes. Life is meaningless when we live it only for ourselves. So some of the symbols of the holiday, the sukkah, of course, we have the lulav, which is the palm frond, the etrog, the myrtle branch, hadassim, and the willow branch that are used in the ritual to celebrate the bounty, called the 4 species. 1, 2, 3, 4. You would hold these 4 species together. You wave them east, north, west, south, up, and down. It connects us to the earth and to nature. Traditional greeting, just as in other holidays, Hag Sameach or Good Yantif, meaning happy holiday, is the proper greeting for the first and last days of the holiday, whereas the proper greeting for the intermediate days is Moedim de Simcha, which means festivals for joy. Speaking of joy, the festival immediately following Sukkot and generally kind of connected to it is Simchat Torah, which means rejoicing in the Torah. It celebrates the end of the reading of the year's Torah cycle. Every year we read through the Torah and starting a new cycle for the next year. It's, again, no foods connected with it, but Torah is marked with synagogue services. Again, this is another one of those services where there might be a lot of wine drinking or drinking. On this holiday, we finish the annual cycle of the Torah reading. We read the very last words of the Torah. As soon as we finish the Torah, we start reading it over from the beginning. The service, generally, you will experience, if you're in a congregation, a lot of dancing, a lot of festivity, as I said, some drinking going on, dancing with the Torah scrolls. It's like a wedding event, but with the Torah. It's a time of intense and great joy. Candles, bread, wine, blessings, Torah scroll parade, drinking, all of those things happen as part of it. Some of the symbols of the holiday, you'll see the Torah scroll, of course, flags that children might carry, and lots of dancing that take place. The standard greeting, again, as with many other greetings, Hag Sameach or Good Yantif, would be one of the greetings that you might say during Simchat Torah. But just a wonderful time of rejoicing. Another time when, if you can go to a synagogue, it's a wonderful place to be. Just a time of joy and celebration for Simchat Torah. And now we move to the winter holidays. There's really only two: Hanukkah and Tu B'Shavat, which is, I mentioned earlier, the New Year, New Year's of the trees. Hanukkah, most of us are familiar in America with this celebration. It's a much more lavish celebration in America than in Israel, perhaps. But we have during Hanukkah, of course, the main event is the lighting of the Hanukkah candles, the Hanukkah. The Hanukkah has 9 candles as opposed to the menorah that has 7, but it is representative of the menorah. But you light the servant candle first, and then you light, depending on how many days of the 8-day festival you're into, you would light that number of candles across here. The name Hanukkah means dedication. It was about the dedication in the temple. It's an 8-day holiday, commemorates the Jewish recapture and rededication of the temple in Jerusalem in 164 before the Common Era. The story of the miracle of the oil, bringing light into the world. This is a rabbinic holiday, but is it really? If you read Leviticus 24:2, that lists all of the festivals, the 7 festivals are listed there. Again, Leviticus 24:2, immediately after the listing of the festivals, it's followed by a discussion of the lighting of the menorah. And some believe that that is a prophetic reference to the celebration of Hanukkah, which is what we're celebrating during that time, is the lighting of the menorah. Spelling of the word Hanukkah could oftentimes is fluctuate. So you'll see it spelled many different ways. They're all right. It's a transliteration of the Hebrew, so again, you can't really spell it wrong. Hanukkah occurs generally around, and many believe, I believe that Christmas, which is the 25th of December, and the Hanukkah, which is the 25th of Kislev, that the date for Christmas was actually taken from the idea of when Hanukkah was, kind of a repeat of that. Jewish holiday foods during Hanukkah: anything fried in oil. Now, this is a celebration of the miracle of the oil. So anything you fry in oil, everything has to be rich with oil. Not a good time for high cholesterol people, but it's important. Potato pancakes, those are my favorites, of course, during the holiday, called latkes. Jelly donuts called sufganiyot. All of those you'll see on the table around the Hanukkah time. The main observance is lighting the candles in a ceremonial lamp called a Hanukkah, or a Hanukkah menorah. You light each night for 8 nights. You play with a spinning top called a dreidel. Hanukkah is a minor festival in the sense that there's no requirement to abstain from work. We eat foods fried in oil to remind us of the small amount of oil, just enough for one day, that miraculously burned 8 days when the Jews rededicated the temple. Symbols of the Jewish holiday: the menorah, the candles, the dreidels here, and the Hanukkah greeting. You can say Hanukkah Sameach, Happy Hanukkah, or Chag Urim Sameach, Happy Festival of Lights. The interesting thing about the dreidels, we'll mention that real quick. There are 4 letters. I'm not going to tell you how to play the game, but I just want to point this out. The 4 letters on the dreidel: Nun, Gimel, Hey, Shin, which stands for Nes, Gadol, Chaya, Sham, a great miracle. Nes, a miracle. Gadol, a great miracle. Nes Gadol. Chaya, happened. Sham, here. I'm sorry, Sham means there. If you are in Israel, this shin is replaced by a pei, which is for po, and that would translate as a great miracle happened here. But of course, if you're outside of Israel, then you're going to use the shin and say there. So that's so you'll see Israeli dreidels will be slightly different in that there won't be a shin, there will be a pei. That is the letter that will be on here. The last celebration to talk about is Tu B'Shavat, the New Year for trees. The Hebrew name simply means the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Shavat. It is the festival or the New Year for trees, is often how it's referred to. When the temple in Jerusalem was still standing, Jews offered the first fruits of their trees on Tu B'Shavat. It's now thought of as an environmental holiday. Earth Day generally happens around the same time. Read Deuteronomy 8:8 for more information about the holiday. The foods, anything, fruit, nuts, anything else that's growing on trees would be appropriate, including the 7 species most appropriate to eat during this time. The 7 species that are talked about as growing in Israel, as being special in Israel, and those would be the wheat, the barley, the grapes, the figs, the pomegranates, the olives, and the dates. Many Jews have reclaimed the mystical practice of the Tu B'Shavat Seder, or ritual meal, as an opportunity to explore environmental themes in Judaism. Another practice is to plant trees. This is a minor festival in that there is no obligation to abstain from work. Symbols of the holiday, of course, trees and the fruit of the trees. Just a typical greeting, Hag Sameach, happy holiday, is appropriate for this time. So again, this is the New Year for the trees, the festival of trees, Tu B'Shavat. That's been a very brief look at the 7 major festivals, several minor festivals involved in the cycle, the yearly cycle, the annual cycle that Judaism celebrates. It is the very special time, usually revolving around family and food. And it's all of the festivals remind us and help us to grow closer to our relationship with God, which is really the purpose and point of all of it. So thanks for sharing that with me. We'll take a look next at the beliefs. That'll be our last class in Judaism 101. So I hope you'll join us for that. For Yeshiva B'nai Noach, I'm Tom Averna. Shalom.